Wise pineapples. Today is the day. I have the honor of introducing a leader who made national headlines by reimagining how work gets done. Justin Lindsey, Chick-fil-A owner operator of the Kendall, Miami location, stunned the industry with his 3-day work week model, giving team members predictable schedules and even 7 consecutive days off each month. And guess what? The result? A 96.6 retention rate and a waiting list of people eager to join his team. He didn't stop there. Justin also created Shiftfish, a scheduling app giving employees more flexibility while saving managers time and stress. He is an innovative leader who proves that culture and innovation aren't just buzzwords, they're game changers. I am so excited to catch up with my next guest. Come join us for this conversation. Welcome, Justin Lindsey. Welcome to the Yes Show. I'm your host, Christine Trippi. Each week, we'll explore the life-changing power of saying yes, along with hotel leadership made easy. Get ready for inspiration, fun, and sweet hospitality. Let's go. Justin, you said yes to rolling out a 3-day work week. What was the spark that led you to create this 3-day work week?
Yeah, it was a few years ago. It feels like ages ago, to be honest. It's funny how time flies. But yeah, the 3-day work week was really my way of trying to do something unique for the team that met the needs that I kept hearing, frankly, over and over and over again. Like during like exit interviews, or even just on a day-to-day basis of being in the restaurant, of hearing from, and it started with the leaders primarily. The leaders were very vocal about, hey, our schedules get changed at the drop of a hat, right? Like if you're in restaurant management, it's just it always kind of been known, and again, just speaking for my restaurant specifically, that okay, well, leaders, your schedule is based on the needs of the business, right? And whatever that means, and so that can
Yep.
mean that you normally your day off is Tuesday, but hey, next week we have this really big catering event and I need you to be there on Tuesday. And so instead of Tuesday, you're going to be off on Thursday. And so from a week to week basis, we'd roll out those schedules, and that was just kind of the perceived norm, in all my years of doing this. But while that had become the norm, it was not the welcome norm amongst the team, right? Like,
Mhm.
and so when I found myself, just kind of listening in on the conversations and just being part of the conversations and just kind of, just trying to understand from them, like, what were the things that you do not like about working here, and I'm
Right.
pretty bold and I don't mind asking the hard questions.
Mhm.
And that was a big piece of it, was the schedule. And so I really started kind of just coming up with like, all right, what can I do to like that gives me some longevity, right? Like I plan on doing this, being a restaurant owner for the rest of my
Right.
career, and continuing to serve at Chick-fil-A during that time. And so I'm like, all right, there's got to be a better way. And I started looking, for resources, different things. And what ultimately came from it was this 3-day work week idea of like, if I could give them a predictable schedule where they know their schedule, they know the days that they're going to work, 12 months in advance, and they work with the same people for 3 consecutive days, right? Like if I could give them some of these things that they were asking for, where they got to rotate weekends off, that became a
Mhm.
big selling point.
Mhm.
Weekends are busy, in the restaurant world. And so a lot of them, shared very vocally that like, look, the only time we get a weekend off is if we're on PTO. That's it. Like if
Mhm.
you're not on PTO and it's Saturday, you're there. Like,
Right.
you're there day shift, night shift, morning shift, you're there. And so one of the things that, that was probably one of the most impactful pieces of the 3-day work week was the flexibility that they received because of the rotations, because they work the 3 consecutive days, and they do that kind of in a block schedule. And on the third week, they rotate, and that's what gives them those weekends off. And so
Yeah. And
ultimately, it was just me trying to find solutions based on what I was hearing.
where did you come up with that thought to do that? Was it looking at a doctor's schedule or the firefighters, how they're like on so many days and
Yeah.
off so many days? Did anything particular spark that idea?
No, so at the time, my brother-in-law was my general manager,
Okay.
and we were getting ready to open our freestanding store location here in Kendall, and I kind of went back to some of what we did during COVID because during COVID there was a period of time that I'd recalled where like you had to keep the team separate, and so you had to like certain people working separate from one
Mm-hmm.
another. So if you had a situation with one group that like you could still operate the restaurant, that sort of thing. And then
Mm-hmm.
also thinking about like the nursing schedules that you hear about a lot, the 3 days and so I literally had sketched out some notes on a napkin, went to breakfast with my brother-in-law, and I said, "Hey, what do you think about this?"
Uh-huh.
And initially he was like, I don't know. That's kind of an odd thing in the restaurant world. Like, it works for these other people. I don't know that it could work for us. And because initially the shortcomings were like, okay, well, not everybody's going to have the availability that's going to meet the needs of this kind of a schedule. Like we
Mm-hmm.
had people that worked for us that like their availabilities were kind of tight. And so
Right.
it's like, how are they going to work a 12 or 13-hour day? Like that's just not gonna, correlate. And so, really we came up with the option of like, well, let's just talk to them. That's kind of my personality in general is like, all right, well, you can punch holes in something all day long, and maybe it doesn't work at the end of the day, and that's okay. But try it and talk to people. Let's just talk. Hey, so we have this crazy idea for a 3-day work week. What do you think? And shockingly enough, like after presenting this plan, those people that had this hard and fast availability within weeks, those availabilities had radically changed and they
They
had,
worked it out.
yeah, they were like, I want this. And
Yes.
the way we went about it that I think was the most impactful though is like all those meetings happened individually. I
Right.
said, look, like I don't care that this is my idea. I don't care who gets credit for it. Like that, it's not about that. I said it's making sure that it's actually seen as a benefit for the team. And
Mm-hmm.
the day that they view it as no longer being a benefit, then we're gonna change it. I said, because it's not about me and this idea and notoriety or anything like that. I said, this is truly like me as a business owner just saying like, all right, I hear you. I'm trying.
Right.
Like, like if you're wanting to come alongside me, maybe this works. And if it does, great.
How amazing is that? And what I love about what you've done here is how many people have had a crazy idea and immediately our knee-jerk reaction is no.
Yeah.
You said, hey, and you made friends with the idea first. You said, hey, what could this look like? Let's talk to people instead of just immediately shutting down the idea. That is why you are so special, Justin.
I don't know
You're,
about that, but I
yeah,
mean the team. I mean the team is, and that's why everybody like after it, got rolled out, and then it, got a lot of attention, right? Like media attention and all those sorts of things.
yes,
Everybody, the first question has like, oh, will this work for this organization or that? Or I said, look, I don't know. And, and
yeah,
I and I try to always be like very descriptive, and I know it's not a great soundbite, when you're doing those interviews and
yeah,
stuff. But I was always just trying to be, I said, look, it all revolves around the people that are in your organization. I said, you got to talk to the people. I said, because at that given time, like that's what they wanted. And current state, that is still what they want that we've seen. But
right.
I said you have to innovate and you got to adapt and you got to be mobile, with these kind of solutions. I said, like, somebody asked me, like, in the next 5 years, will the 3-day work week change? I would say, based on what I'm seeing current state in the restaurant, absolutely. There's going to
Mm,
be, and we're literally working on variations of it right now as we
okay.
speak.
Are you still doing it?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're
Yes,
still
we
doing it.
are.
I love
Yes.
that. You're
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
doing it. Now, at the time, you had a 96% retention rate and pretty much a line out the door of people waiting to work for you
Yeah.
because you're so cool. And you've just reimagined what it's like to work in a restaurant. This is just a fantastic. So tell me what it's like today and where are you going with the program?
Yeah, so it's still 100% in operation. So I
Okay.
have the freestanding store, the Chick-fil-A Kendall location.
Okay.
That's where it started. That's the 3-day work week. And then I also have the Chick-fil-A Dadeland Mall location now, which is
Oh.
right down the street from the freestanding store. So we have both of those locations and both currently operate the 3-day work week. We had one of our leaders that now is a Chick-fil-A owner operator himself
Ah.
that kind of grew up out of that program. And he was one of them that was instrumental in helping me to like get it set up and get it operating. So excited for him. He owns a Chick-fil-A now in Sebring, Florida.
And is
Uh,
he doing the 3-day?
He's not. No. So
Oh,
it's yeah, it's interesting, like that was actually one of the first questions I had like when
interesting.
he was going through his selection process was, are you going to do the 3-day work? He's like, I don't know. And but I love the way, he did speak about it because I think it's powerful to understand that like he said it depends on the team that I have.
Right.
Depends on the community that I'm serving. I said like we live in in Miami. Miami's very different than like where he is in Sebring. It's a very
Hmm.
small town. Just recently had one of our leaders that oversaw like our training and our hiring process and all that. It was also part of the 3-day work week and one of the originators of that. Now she's in the what's called the leadership development program. So
Okay.
that's a program where they go through and they're basically like or like working for Chick-fil-A on like the corporate level and they're going
Oh.
around like serving at Chick-fil-A restaurants. And then at the conclusion of that program, depending on how they do, they can become a Chick-fil-A owner operator themselves. Yeah. So, I mean, we've seen it develop into kind of really like selfishly speaking, like some of the ways that I wanted it to develop in is like
Hmm.
allowing people to shine because in the 3-day week, like it's competitive in the sense that you can kind of see a scorecard for each group, right? Like you can
Hmm.
see like, okay, if this group is working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I can realistically look and see how that group scored versus the
Right.
team that's working like maybe the Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, right? Like what were your guest service scores during those 3 days, right? Based on the guests that ate in your dining room, how did they rate that experience versus the ones that ate with this group? How did they rate that experience? And so that was always kind of from my selfish end. It was like, hey, give them the schedule they want. But then from a business owner end, is like, I want to see who's really being effective and the
Hmm.
ones that maybe are struggling, like how can I come alongside them and help? And then the other piece that just very, very recently started talking about is like, what does a part-time pod leader look like? And so we have some people that have joined us that are part-time. And so for some of them, they don't have full-time availability. And so the traditional 3-day work week that I kind of designed is like, well, it doesn't necessarily work for them right now. Maybe it will in the future.
Hmm.
But then I started thinking like, okay, but how can I get the best for those folks and develop them and create this massive bench for myself and for my restaurant organization, right? And so we started thinking like, okay, well, if we can give them a pod schedule, right? Most of them want to work between 15 and 20 hours a week because of school
Right.
schedule. And so, what if we could give them the same predictability and give them that same 3-day week and give them that same camaraderie with that same group of people on that pod, right? And instead of working a 12 or 13-hour day, they work a 6-hour day. And you basically duplicate them. So you have like a, maybe a morning and afternoon one, and then maybe an evening, person on the pod. And so instead of one person, working that 12, 13 hours, you basically have two people. We're kind of envisioning right now and like talking about like, okay, what does this look like?
I love that. So your line level team members also can participate in that 3 day. It's not just for leaders, right?
That's correct. That's
Correct.
correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And then what would you say is the retention today?
I don't know, to be honest with you. Actually, when you mentioned retention, I was like, I probably need to look. But it's still pretty strong. I don't know the exact percentage off the top of my head. I can say that like the leadership wise, like Alyssa, the one that just got into the leadership development program, like that's what we've kind of seen is like when they leave, it's typically for
It's
something like
development.
that. Or
Right.
Jared, like when he got his own franchise, that's always been my goal. Like I've never been one of those that like, yeah, I want team member retention to be as high as possible and all those sorts of things
Hmm.
for obvious reasons. I think every business owner wants good retention. But my strategy had always been like, if I could create something that they like and they enjoy, like this scheduling model, the 3-day work week, and I can kind of create like a launching pad, so to speak, for people to go off and do what it is long term that they want to do. Whether that's becoming an owner operator, going to work, at the
Hmm.
corporate office in Atlanta, whatever that is, like that to me is the most impactful thing, right? Like
Hmm.
figuring out like what people want and then helping them to get there. Like that's what I've always just tried to figure out how to do. And so that's why like in the last, year or so, like having these folks move on, I was ecstatic. And maybe some
Hmm.
people look at like, wait, you just lost the person
No.
that does the training and hiring for both locations. with north of 250 people that work for us, and I was like, yes, and I was very happy,
Yes.
and I said because she had put in many years working for me. That person, Alyssa, she started with me as a team member, and
Mm-hmm.
grew up through the organization, joined the 3-day work week, became a leader, led different departments. Job well done. It was like she had grabbed the baton, she took it, she ran with it, she was innovative, she made our training better, our hiring better. And I said, like, she'll always leave that mark on the business, but ultimately, like, it's my job to not like hold on to that person and say, oh, I want you here for another 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, like help them to figure out, like, hey, go and do your thing. Like, if it's not the 3-day work week, that's cool, but like go and do something that's, listen to your team, find out what your team wants
Mm-hmm.
based on whatever community it is that you serve, and then give them those things if you can.
And that truly, to me, is the marker of a great leader, is how many leaders they put in the world. And
Yeah,
that's really the goal right there, is to help people to reach and get into the seats that you're in and then even surpass it. That's a remarkable thing. And I feel like that's really the driver behind everything that you've created, the 3-day work week. So being able to give people that 3-day work week, not only do you have more time the rest of the week, but you also end up with a 7 consecutive days off
that's
every
correct.
month, was it right?
Yep, once a month because of the way the rotation works, because they're in that block. So like you'll have one
Hmm.
pod working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and they'll do that 2 consecutive weeks. So they'll do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday this week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday next week. Then that pod is off for 7 consecutive days. And then they come back the third week on Thursday and they do the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, then Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Then they're off Sunday, come back, do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and so you have that rotation on that third week to where they have 7 consecutive days off once a
Yeah,
month.
and just think about the quality of life that you can have when given this gift. Honestly, it's a gift. So I
Oh
just,
yeah. No, I
yeah,
mean, no, we
you
have
are
mom.
always in my mind back here. All these years, I think about you all the time. I talk about you all the time. I think you're so phenomenal. It's just
Yeah.
a phenomenal operation, and I'm just endlessly impressed with you. So
Well, thanks.
then you had to go and even top it with something called shift fish.
Hmm.
So tell
Yeah.
us about that. Tell us how it came about. Tell everyone about what you created with shift fish. Shift
Yeah.
fish.
So
That's not easy to say.
yeah, I
Shift
know.
fish.
Yeah. The idea was to, at that time, like when we rolled out the 3-day work week in the initial stage, it was interesting to hear the feedback from the part-timers, the group that we were
Okay.
literally just talking about, right? That like, oh, this is really cool for this
Them.
them. It's not so cool for us, and I didn't expect that at all. I probably should have in hindsight, right? But as I'm walking around the restaurant on a day-to-day basis, I started hearing that like more and more and more. Like, well, what about us? How do we get a predictable schedule? How do we get? And I was like, oh no, and I was like, is not going the way I intended. And so I started looking, same thing, at other industries, to be frank, healthcare, airline industries. And so started talking to different folks and asking about like, hey, how do you do a schedule? And that's just kind of how it started. And we have a regular guest actually that eats with us at the Kendall location who is a commercial airline pilot and started kind of being inquisitive with him. I'd sit there and have breakfast with him in the dining room occasionally. And come to find out, I was like, okay, so in a certain sense, they're creating their own schedule. Like it's
Okay.
based on seniority, based on, all these different factors, right? But they kind of have this ability to like create their own schedule. Like, the company puts out like, hey, here's the schedule that we need to fill. And then
Hmm.
based on the parameters that are set in the background, it's like, okay, can they go and then instead of us scheduling them, can they schedule themselves? And so that's kind of how it started. It was really just a way of like, okay, is there something out there that exists that I could utilize? And so I
Right.
started looking and I couldn't find anything. Most of this software that was being used for like, airlines and healthcare and things like that were very geared towards that industry.
Mm.
But when I started asking about like, okay, well, what about restaurants? Most of the things were geared towards like gig workers. There's a
Oh,
lot of like self-scheduling. And I said, no, no, no. Like I'm looking for something that like this person's worked for me for 5 or 6 years. They're a team member, right? And I couldn't find really what I was looking for. So I partnered with a group of developers and said like, hey, can you build this? I don't do code or anything like that. I have no background whatsoever in that world. And so we're still on the mission. Like so when we got the mall location, that was one of our big initiatives when we got that as the second location was to see like okay like it's a smaller team there. Let's see, can we get Shift Fish like fully rolled out with this group?
okay.
I will say in my almost 15 years of doing this, dealing like the software side and trying to make this work has been the hardest thing I've ever done in 15 years. It's
Really?
incredibly difficult. Even with the team, we held a team-wide meeting with the entire restaurant staff, tried to explain like, and they were ecstatic because like some of the things that Shift Fish offers is like there's no time off request, right? Like, and we
Hmm.
told them, like you want time off, just don't schedule yourself that day.
Right.
Fine, like no big deal. Like I want to take that burden off of the managers because it creates a lot of conflict that's frankly unnecessary. The interesting thing, I will say this, is like when we did this most recent rollout of it with the team, we hit about 70% shift pickup rate within 2 days. So
Wow.
and it was wonky. Like the software was breaking down, like stuff wasn't working. Like and it was but the really interesting thing is like even when I go to the restaurant, when I'm visiting both restaurants and it is really interesting to talk to team members and I still hear people talking about things like shift fish, things like 3-day work week. And that's the to me like that's the most beneficial piece. I think a team can feel and can see like when you're making attempts at making life a little bit better.
And I think that's a big part of it with you, Justin, is that you're listening to people, people feel heard, and that your momentum and your motivation behind it is truly to create a great work experience for people and help them have great lives. And
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
that's really felt. So I just again I can't be more impressed. So tell
Yeah.
us, what are some of the blocks that happened? Where did you lose anybody because of this? Did you was there any like, that didn't work and that was a great learning opportunity? And any of that happened that sticks in your mind?
The biggest thing I'd say initially is like there is like an adoption phase in terms of people
Hmm.
just getting used to the schedule.
Change. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, like that was probably the biggest thing is like the communication. I'd say that was the biggest one. Was like
Okay.
being able to figure out, okay, you have two groups of people that are never going to interact, and
Right.
how do
Right.
you ensure that it still looks and feels like the same restaurant on a Monday that it is on a Saturday, even though
Yeah.
it's two different, completely different groups of people working that, and they're not really handing anything off. There's no like
Mm.
baton in the middle of the week. And so we had to come up with like a sort of a like a homegrown blueprint on like what the communication looks like. There were some naysayers in the organization that were like punching holes in it, and when we
Right.
were having our meetings, and saying like, well, it's not going to work because I can't communicate with this person. And I remember having a meeting, and I remember it vividly. And I said, okay, so right now, and this was before 3 days, we were doing the 5-day week. And I said, all right, right now, one of the biggest challenges I hear is that the night shift fails to communicate effectively with the day shift. I said, I hear that every
I
day
think
at the restaurant.
every hotel and restaurant, that's the
Yeah.
number one problem.
Oh yeah.
Continue.
And so so as we're sitting around this table talking about like before the 3-day work week became a thing, right? We had all the individual meetings, then we went to the group meeting stage. And I said, "All right, throw the punches, like throw punch the holes in it. Why will it not work?" And the person that said that, he says, well, I can't communicate. If I get off on Wednesday, that group comes Thursday. They have no idea what's been going on in the restaurant the past 3 days. And yet they're supposed to just walk in and just go on business
Start.
as
Yeah.
usual. And I said, okay, so what happens now, like from a Monday night to a Tuesday? And he says, well, what do you mean? And I said, okay, so, and I used specific examples. And I said, well, let's pull it up, like, and I go through our Slack channel that we, have always
Right.
used. And I said, okay, so I see this person coming in on Tuesday and they're confused and they're angry because this wasn't done last night and this wasn't left and we didn't know about this catering order. We didn't know about that catering order. I didn't know this person's uniform was here and they were coming in to start training at 9 o'clock in the morning. I need you to better communicate with me night shift to let me know that that uniform box came in and where it was. I said, so that already happens. And I looked across the table and it was like stunned silence. And he's like, yeah, I guess you're right. And I said, "Oh, okay, so we already so let's get it out there that we already have communication problems. Like, and that's
Mhm.
okay. It's not okay to stay there. We got to fix this." And
Right.
so what we came up with was it's called a pod red book. And
Okay.
and it's individual topics. So there's one for repairs and maintenance, there's one for training and development, there's one for call outs, there's one for performance issues, attendance issues, so on and so forth, going down the list. But when the pod that is exiting, so like the pod that left yesterday, and they're done with their 3 days, right? Wednesday is
Right.
handing off to the pod coming in on Thursday. They have to complete that pod red book as a group. So the leaders sit down
Okay.
together, share notes, and say, like, okay, these people showed up late the last 2 days, and they put that in the pod red book. We have a large catering order, going out on Thursday at 7 o'clock in the morning. It's a delivery, it needs to be out the door at 6:30 in the morning. The boxes with the sauces are ready in the walk-in cooler, next to the lettuce or,
Hmm.
something like that to that extent. Fryer number two has not been working, called for a repair. Repair person will be there on Thursday at before noon.
Right.
And so they put that in that red book. So then when you're that pod coming in on Thursday, you look at that and it's kind of like a newsletter almost of like
Hmm.
the state of the business. Here's what's going on.
Right.
So you can just kind of hit the ground running. But that came out of just trying to uncover like, okay, what are going to be the obstacles that we're going to encounter? Like as
Right.
great as this thing is, there's going to be challenges. There's going to be,
Hmm.
things. The biggest one that I can think of was that because the
Love
the
it.
the pod red book is like if they do it thoroughly, it's great. That's where like I come in as like restaurant owner to ensure that like that they're actively doing those things and that
Hmm.
they're actively like and effectively communicating thoroughly. Like if I see like a pod red book message and it's like 2 sentences, I'm like, no, like, all right,
Yeah.
there's got to be more that happen in 3 days than that. And
Hmm.
and share more with your peers. But that also helps me, like as we talked about before, like thinking of growing that next generation of like developing future owners, developing future corporate staff members, all
Hmm.
these things out of the restaurant that I desire to do. That gives me real ways of coaching them. Because if I know that it's, somebody like Alyssa, the one that went into the leadership development program, if it was one of her weeks to do that red book message, and I see that she just didn't do a really great job of it, then that gives me an opportunity to sit down with her and say, like, okay, what about the red book was misleading or confusing? Like, how can I
Hmm.
help you to be more thorough here? Because you have to be able to give your peers a fighting chance. If I came in on Thursday after reading that message, I would have had no clue as to what's been going on in the restaurant,
Right.
and so it helps you to like teach them those basic skills, how to effectively communicate, how to work with others, all those little things.
Right. And all of those things, no matter where they go in their life, that's going to benefit them. Those are the
100%.
basics that sometimes get missed,
Yeah.
especially in our remote worlds and things like that and watching from each other. So yeah, that's all really great skill set things that they'll use no matter where they go in their careers. So for the naysayer, or what I like to say, the coconuts, the coconuts who go, oh, well, that's great for Justin, Justin's special, but that can't work for me. What message might you want to share with them?
I would say just talk to your team. Like I mean, because I get that. Like when it went out, like in the media world, the 3-day work week, I had some I'd say many naysayers like that were like that. They were like, oh, hey, that's great for you. You have this massive restaurant, like it works for you, and I'd always tell them, I was like, well, maybe that's true to some extent, right? Like maybe it does work for this team and it's not going to work for your team. I don't know.
Right.
But I would always point back to I said, and I know this is kind of old school and I know it, it sounds simple, but it's so true. I said, but talk to your team, put yourself there on the floor with the people that truly matter, that are serving the people that really matter, right? Your guests,
Hmm.
and hear from them point blank, like what is the things that they want and they need. And it may not be the 3-day work week because I've made that mistake in the past. I've made those assumptions and like, oh, this is what they want. And then sometimes you find out, no, it's not.
No,
And I
it's
could have
not.
saved myself a whole lot of time and heartache if I just would have asked.
And even everything that you've been through, it probably could have been easier just to keep doing the same old thing and
Oh,
just keep
100%.
doing it. But you chose to make it harder, but to find a better way. And now you're reinventing what working in a quick serve restaurant could be, which is
Yeah.
amazing. Tell us this. Are there any great stories that have come of it? Like a mom that was able to, be that single mom, or any great stories that, that really pop for you that came from changing what you did, changing the status quo.
Yeah, we had one that I remember vividly because I was at the restaurant, sat in the dining room to have my lunch, and I usually try to find tables where like team members or leaders are sitting, and say, "Hey, can I sit here?" And just chat with them and catch
You're
up,
so
for a few
adorable.
for a few minutes, and so I was sitting there with one of our leaders at the time and just catching up. I was like, how are things? She said, oh, really good. Like, I'm going to be graduating from UCF. And I said, oh, things going fine, like with work and school, like you're able to like get things done, anything that like I can do from my end to help. And I never forget what she said because it was so like, it was really like just hit me powerful. She's like, if it wasn't for the 3-day work week, there's no way I'd be graduating. And I was like, oh wow. And she said I was struggling like with school, struggling to like maintain like the balance with schoolwork and having to work and like put herself through school and all these different challenges.
Hmm.
And she's like, if it wasn't for this, there's no way I'd be graduating right now. And I remember thinking like, wow. Like, I mean,
Right.
and it just like, yeah, I mean, I was just
Yeah.
like, wow, okay, that's a big one. But I'll never forget it because like I just sat there for a second and I was just like, okay, we're on to something here. Like that was
Yes.
the first thing I thought of was just like, okay, like if we can do more of this, then like we're definitely on to something
Yes.
because
And helping people reach their goals, live their
yeah.
lives, do the things they want to do.
Yeah, so that's Alyssa. Alyssa now is pursuing her dream of becoming an owner operator. She's in that leadership
Ah,
development program. So
look.
she went from team member, working at a team member role, like entry level, team member, just taking orders and things like that, right on the register, to literally growing. She led the marketing department, led our training department, did our hiring, became one of our leaders, graduated college, and now, pursuing, becoming a franchisee herself. And so I think that one was like really, really, really powerful because it was just
Yes.
like, yeah, like I mean that to me is important. Like I was the first person in my family to go to college, pursue, a college
Mhm.
education. And so hearing that from her was like, okay, that's pretty cool.
So that's pretty impactful. I
Yeah.
hope that you realize sometimes we get in the day to day of our job and the job that we have ahead of us and how daunting it can be running two quick serve restaurants. I can only imagine
Yeah.
that. I hope that you realize and take those moments to realize the lives that you are changing by being the leader that you are. Not just creating these great programs, but saying, "Hey, can I sit with you at lunch? Can I,
Yeah.
being there and serving the drinks right alongside with them." You're very different than many owners. And I think it's because of your leadership that you've got people that are now owning their own restaurants, going to corporate and leading training teams, graduating college. So it's just a
Yeah.
remarkable thing. And I know all of us out there, we work so hard. And I want you to take a moment to think about the difference that you're making because it is huge. It's huge. And
Thank you.
then, not only that, the customers that you serve,
Yeah.
you're helping them and then they're better than them what's happening in their lives. You know what? That could be a single dad bringing his kids on the weekend and that's the only time he sees his kids and
Yeah.
you're creating this magical time together at Chick-fil-A. So, it's a really cool thing and I'm just endlessly impressed with you.
I'll
So
definitely
the
check it out. Yeah.
question from my last guest for you is,
Okay.
and they didn't know you were the guest, is what is your favorite book and why?
I think the favorite is The Traveler's Gift, Andy
Oh,
Andrews. That one's really interesting. So I was a history major in college. I've always loved history, and it's kind of like a historical adaptation of like if you could go back in time of all these major events and all these like influential, whether it's political or just historical figures in general.
Right.
Like if you could be in the room with them when they were making these like incredible decisions, like what lessons could be learned from that?
Oh,
And so it's almost like this, like again, it's just this kind of story of going back in time and just like learning all of these little things, these little kind of nuggets of wisdom from each of these like, historical figures. It's one of those where I just read it the first time and I'm like, that's really cool. Like there's just so many things that like every time I read it, there's something else that I get, probably just because of that season of life that you're in, whatever it is.
hmm
Like there's something from it that's like, okay, yeah,
Hits you a new way.
I need to hear
Yeah.
that,
Yes.
so yeah, that's a good
Well,
one.
time travel is my favorite topic. So it's kind of time traveling, and I love
Yeah.
history too, and lessons and being a fly on the wall. So that sounds like a good one. I'm going to definitely pick that up. That was Traveler's Gift.
Yep. The Traveler's
The
Gift. Yep.
Traveler's Gift. I love that. Okay, if you have time for
Yeah.
my quick little Chick-fil-A rapid round, are you
Sure. Yeah.
game?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. All right, my friend. Chicken nuggets or sandwich?
Nuggets.
Nuggets.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Coke or sweet tea?
Sweet tea.
Sweet tea. All right.
Yeah.
Waffle fries, dip them in sauce or eat them straight.
Oh, sauce. Chick-fil-A
And
sauce.
which
Oh,
sauce? Chick-fil-A sauce. Okay.
oh
There's some in
yeah.
my fridge right now.
Yeah.
Best time to visit Chick-fil-A. Breakfast, lunch, or dinner?
Lunch. It's
Ooh,
busy. Really, it's always busy for lunch. I don't know. I just love lunch. It's fun with all the excitement at
the
lunch.
groove of the day. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
If you could add one secret menu item permanently, what would you add?
Oh, wow. Man, that's a tough one. Secret menu item. Hmm.
Hmm.
I don't know. I never thought about that, to be honest. Uh, Maybe like a apple pie or something would be nice.
Oh,
But
apple pie.
like because I love our ice cream's really good. So
Yes, it is
back in the
really
day,
good.
we had like a lemon pie that was really really good. Like when I first started at Chick-fil-A many years ago, and that would be pretty cool if we could get that back.
And the big one, Polynesian, Chick-fil-A, or ranch? What's your go-to sauce? Is it
Oh,
Chick-fil-A?
Chick-fil-A sauce.
Chick-fil-A sauce.
Yeah,
Okay.
100%. Yeah,
Very nice. I
absolutely.
can't
Yeah.
wait to hear and see what comes next from you, Justin. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us today because
Oh,
you
my
really
pleasure. Thanks
are
for having me.
such a breath of fresh air.
No, thank you.
And for all of you out there, your main action item from this show today is to just, again, when ideas come to you, pause, make friends first with it, and just ask yourself, how could that work? What would that feel like? And I think another great action item is to just talk to your team. Talk to the team and see what friction they're having and what ideas everyone has to potentially help that. Yeah, love it. Well, Justin, again, thank you so much for being with us. I can't wait to talk to you again with your next big idea.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks again. That's a wrap for today's show. Say yes to taking action and changing the world one yes at a time. And oh, my friend, will you say yes to review, like, and subscribe? The more yeses you give, the more juicy goodness I can bring to all of you wise pineapples. Cool or cool?